Well, hello and welcome to episode 251 of Drink the Movies. I'm Brian here, as always, with Michaela. And Michaela, there's a couple of things I've never done. I've never been from Scotland. I've been to Scotland. I've never been from Scotland. I've
Okay,
never
yeah.
I've never done copious amounts of heroin or any heroin. But after this week's film, I feel like maybe I've done both of those things some point in a previous life. Today we're talking about Trainspotting. They say it's one of the all-time great uh, British films of all time. We'll talk about that. What do you think? Trainspotting. It's quite the wild ride to go on. Back now, almost 20 years since it came
Yeah.
out.
30. It came out in
30.
1996. 30.
Math is bad for me. Yeah,
Thir-
absolutely. 30
30, 30
years.
years. That's why we're
Happy
doing it this year.
happy
Happy
birthday,
happy
Trainspotting.
birthday, Tommy and Sick Boy and Renton. My gosh. Yeah. Yeah. So this movie came out and I remember somebody telling me that it hit you like heroin does at the very beginning, and that if you don't
Mm.
like the first 5 minutes of this movie, you're not going to like it at all. And so you should just, give it the 5 minutes, and if you don't like it, turn it off because it's not going to get
Live
any
a life of
better.
sobriety.
Like, right? But we've talked a bit about some of these movies that happened in the late 90s, early 2000s that were like all about like the descent into drug-induced hell, right? And this
Yeah.
film, I think, was the first one to really to do that in our generation. I mean, I want to say that Blow happened later. Blow was in 2001,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
Requiem for a Dream was in 2000. So this is the tip of the iceberg, that where we go down that rabbit hole of really terrible drug addiction. And it's set in this beautiful, well, it's not beautiful. It's set in a really stark look of what it's like to be in the 90s or late 80s in Scotland, which doesn't look that much different than if you were like in the boroughs of New York or something like that. It's
Hmm.
amazing
Sure.
how similar and also very dissimilar it is. And I don't know about you, but I'm really glad we have subtitles now because I got a lot more out of watching it this time because I knew what the heck they were saying.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, the crossover there to the US was something that was interesting about this story, and we'll talk about that here after we get into the movie a little bit. But before we do that, we need to go ahead and mix up a drink that is going to pay homage to the film Trainspotting, and we're going back to a favorite here from Drink the Movies, Cinema Sips. So let's do that. Let's go ahead and grab a couple of things of scotch, and we'll be right back to mix up this week's drink.
So, Brian, we were inspired by Cinema Sips. Cinema Sips has been, I don't know, a kindred spirit to us. I feel like they talk about movies, they talk about cocktails, very similar, and their stuff is always really inspired. And I remember it was during a lobby bar, I think early last year, where we were talking about penicillin, the cocktail called penicillin, and
Mhm.
how it came. It's a cocktail that's well known. It's been around for a while, but we talked about Cinema Sips, and this was the film that they covered, and I was like, oh, that makes sense. Okay. I don't know if I'd ever actually made a penicillin. Maybe I have one time before
Mhm.
for the lobby bar, but this time I did it with my own simple syrup that I made, which was kind of cool. We're doing everything real fancy here at Drink the Movies, and I made like a honey ginger simple syrup, and the cinema sips recipe only calls for just a honey simple syrup. So we're gonna talk about the differences there, but kind of neat.
Yeah, kind of neat, kind of neat. We did the penicillin cocktail for one of the lobby bar like classics that we recorded, and the penicillin hadn't really been named in any movies that we could find, but we did see that Cinema Sips had used this to pay homage to Trainspotting, and I think that it's kind of a perfect pairing for that. And the penicillin is a new classic cocktail, which I've had out a couple of times, but I've never had at home. I've never made one for myself. So yeah, we've got a couple of different techniques here. You made a ginger honey syrup, so we'll circle back to that. But let's talk about the one that Cinema Sips made here, because it's pretty simple to put together. If you've got some ginger, what you're going to want to do is go ahead and get that peeled off. You can actually take like the back of a spoon and just kind of rub the skin off that ginger, put it into a couple of slices, and then throw that down into a mixing glass. Go ahead and give that a good muddle so you get all that ginger juicy spicy goodness out of there. And then to that, you're going to add 2 ounces of blended scotch, 3/4 of an ounce of lime juice, and then 3/4 of an ounce of honey syrup, which is just equal parts honey to water. You can play around with that ratio if you want to, if you want something a little bit more honey forward. But the recipe here calls for 1-to-1 ratio there. Go ahead and add some ice, give that a shake, and then you're going to strain it into a rocks glass with a big ice cube. And then you're going to just float about 1/4 of an ounce of an Islay Scotch on top of that. That is the Scotch that people think of when they're like, Scotch tastes like an ashtray. Well, that's specifically an Islay Scotch. So you want to make sure you get one of those there to float on top. And it's just going to give it kind of a nice little pop of aromatic smoke to the drink as you drink it. And then you get that nice kind of the sweetness from the honey. You get that lemon juice kind of cuts through that smokiness a little bit, and then the ginger has a really nice kind of counterbalance to the sweeter notes that come in like a blended Scotch whiskey. This is a fantastic drink. I love the way Cinema Sips put this one together. But let's hear how you did yours with your ginger honey syrup.
So, I did the ginger honey syrup just as you described to make the simple syrup. Once it's cooled down, you can put it in the fridge or whatever. But I made it real fresh, and so I let it kind of sit until it was not warm because you don't want it to water down your drink. But I did it just like this. I have to say, I was real excited about this drink until I opened the bottle of the Islay Scotch and smelled the smell, and I was like, "Oh, it's a peat mossy mess." Look, some people love that smell. The year of whiskey, I think for me was whiskey, Scotch, bourbon, all of that was like 2023, and I just don't think I have the palate for Islay Scotch. But I will say, this was pretty good. I mean, I think that if you stir it enough and you get some of that ice melt into it about 3/4 of the way through or halfway through the drink, the Islay kind of metals like uh, evens out and moderates a little bit, and that's kind of nice.
Mhm.
I did float it on the top just like you, and that was hard. I'm not gonna lie, that was real hard. But I feel like it's kind of one of those things. It's very train spotting to be this because you start watching this film and you're like descending into this world that is probably pretty realistic and yet terrifying for most people. And
Mhm. Mhm.
and then by the end of it, things that should absolutely shock you just don't anymore. And that's kind of how I felt about having the end of the drink. By the end of the
Oh,
drink, I was
okay.
like, I lay scotch, whatever,
You were
man.
you were
Can
up
I
for
get
anything.
another? Because I
Yeah.
need I need another drink to get through the rest of this movie. Whew.
That's right. You're ready to just take your alleged friend's money and make a break for it by the end of this drink here. Yeah, this is a good one. Like I said, it's a modern classic. So you can probably see penicillin on like fancier bars, restaurants that you go to now. So definitely give it a try and definitely make one up if you are inclined to like these ingredients. I like an Islay Scotch, a little bit of that pea every once in a while. It's not my preferred Scotch to have by a
Mm.
long shot, but I do like it in kind of small doses every once in a while. It's kind of nice to have, especially this time of year when it's colder and things like that. And you can, I don't know, imagine yourself in the Scottish Highlands, just rethinking your life like you do in train spotting. So let's do this, Michaela. Let's go ahead and take a quick break. We'll fire up train spotting if you can find it. Maybe we'll talk about that here, and we'll be right back to chat about this week's film, Train Spotting. There, I said it again.
Spoiler warning for Train Spotting. If you've not seen this film, you've had 30 years. And I'm also going to say like a trigger warning for anybody who's like sensitive in any way to like drug use, um, violence, the death of infants. Like if you if it it's there's a
If you're a
lot. There's a
discerning human being, maybe
like
skip train spotting. I don't
Like,
know.
no, don't skip it. Don't skip it. Just know what you're
Oh,
getting into. Because when I watched this the first time, I did not know what I was getting into, and I was not okay afterwards for a very long time. But we're going to talk about all those things. So if you have not watched it and you feel brave enough, and we've gave you such a ringing endorsement, you have to go watch it. Go try to find it. We're going to talk about that in a minute, and watch it, and then come back so we can chat about all things train spotting, including all the terrible things that happen. Yes. Okay.
that's true.
Done.
And if you're older than, I don't know, 25 and you've never lived in Scotland or done hard drugs, then maybe you're too old to watch Trainspotting. On a side note, so this was released in 1996. It was directed by Danny Boyle, who we know because as of the release of this, the 28 years later is out, right? And
Mhm.
that is a Danny Boyle thing there, that whole franchise world. But it kind of starts here with Trainspotting. I think there was a feature film before this that introduces Danny Boyle and Ewan McGregor, and then they go on to do this film here in 1996. And Ewan McGregor plays a pretty pivotal role. He is playing Renton, the heroin-fueled navigator of the story, I guess, more or less, right? He's the ship we're sailing with kind of throughout this thing. So he's kind of narrating it, and we're following along with his story. And it also introduces us to Kelly MacDonald as Diane. Now, I always think of Kelly MacDonald as being from Boardwalk Empire, but I think probably more well known. She plays the lady in Brave, right? She's the voice
Yes,
of Brave.
she
What is her
she's
name? I never saw Brave, but
Merida. Merida. You've never
there you
seen
go.
Brave?
No,
Oh man. Okay,
too busy
so
watching
I
Train Spotting, I guess.
right. Okay. Well, they are very different, but I do like. I do really like Brave. I think out of all kind of she's the first Disney princess that's like, I'll be doing it with my own name. I'll be able to save my own self. She's amazing. And it's all because of Kelly MacDonald. Am I saying her name right?
Yeah,
No.
Kelly MacDonald. Yeah,
Yes, beautiful.
absolutely.
Great. Okay.
So she is Diane. Don't fall in love with her. This is a bad idea.
Don't touch
Renton,
her.
we'll
Leave her
we'll
alone, dude.
we'll talk about that here in a second. This was nominated for an Oscar for Best Adapted Screenplay because it was based on a book that came out in 1993 by Irvine Welsh of the same name, which is basically kind of this thing. I don't know. Like it's hard to describe Train Spotting. In a lot of ways. It's kind of like a slice of life kind of a thing
Mm,
because the story here really is pretty thin. So let's just go ahead and talk about it. Basically, we kind of start the film off, and it was kind of unique, I think, probably for 1996 when this happens, because Danny Boyle starts the film, and you get Ewan McGregor's their character is like running through. He's doing this monologue kind of thing about how to live like a normal life or like a happy life. I don't know what is it called. I don't remember, but he's talking
choose
about that, and he
life.
goes,
Choose.
choose life. And he gets hit by this car, and then you're like, what's happening? And then it kind of does this flashback, and then it circles back around to catch up with the action here in this film. So that was probably pretty unique, I guess, for 1996. Maybe I don't know,
Yeah.
but we're starting off there, and Renton is not making the right decisions, right? He is a drug addict. He's hanging out with other drug addicts and people that are addicted to other things that are potentially not good, and he's starting to reevaluate his life kind of right off the bat.
Yeah, yeah. What I found interesting about this whole like beginning segment is it really hits you in a way that I imagine because I've actually never done heroin, believe it or not. But it hits you in the way that I feel like heroin might because it just is immediately running.
What,
You,
getting
you can
run over by a
feel
car
it's
when you're
almost
running down
no,
the
he,
street?
but he's running down the street. He's saying all these things. It's like choose life, choose a job, find a girl, find somebody, work on your lawn, buy a house, have some kids, like all of these things. And then at the end of that monologue, he's like, or you can just be high on heroin. It's like you can either do all these other things or you can just sit there and feel nothing. And then like after this running kind of scene, which is really cool because it looks like the camera is running with him
Mhm.
as he's literally running through the streets. And again, I don't know the details, but Danny Boyle is really good at setting a city afire with like as if it's part of the as if it's a character itself, right? We saw that in 28 Days Later, where, the city of London just looks like it's completely
Mhm.
empty and it's terrifying. This is like somewhere in Scotland, and he's running down all these streets and he's doing all these things, and then he kind of falls backwards and like slams his head on the ground and doesn't care because he's high. He's going like he just shot himself up with heroin. And it's interesting to me because it's like almost funny how these are like the good old days for him. He's making it
Mhm. Yeah.
sound like it's like, oh, remember that time that, I decided I was gonna quit heroin and you have it down to a science now. I got all these things I'm gonna eat. I've got all this stuff I'm gonna drink. I've got this stuff I'm gonna watch. I'm gonna board myself up in a room. But first I'm gonna go get high one more time. And like, it's just I don't know, it's almost it's hilarious in the way it's delivered to the audience because it is so you're so incredulous as like a normal functioning human that this
Mhm.
is the way people think, but also it is terrifying because this is probably the way someone has felt and someone has behaved in the past, right? And it's just it's like as if Adventures in Babysitting, except babysitting was heroin usage.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean there's a lot of that, and I think that there's a fair bit of humor, especially kind of at the offset right before things really start to kind of go bad for Renton in particular, and then kind of the rest of the crew there. But yeah, I like the opening scene there where he's like, I need to to get my act together, and he's like literally like boards himself up in the room, which is kind of funny, right? Because he's bringing in all the stuff and like wheeling the TV up next to the bed because he knows he's about to go through some like big crash. He's trying to like detox or kick the drugs,
Mm.
but then the very next frame is like he's like busted down the door that he's bolted open and he's off to go get one last fix, and then that gets you kind of into the first like I don't even know how to describe it. It's kind of like the visual, like the imagery of like
Mm.
what like a high is, right? As you're running into the worst bathroom in all of Scotland, and I don't know if that's true or not. It looked pretty bad to me. Might be the worst bathroom anywhere as you're going and trying to fish your drugs out of this bathroom, which isn't great. Which isn't great. And then you get some more kind of scenes like that, right? So you have Renton there is going through the toilet. That's kind of one of the more, I guess, like famous ones of Trainspotting. But I think one of my favorite kind of like trip kind of image kind of things that we get is when he's like falling into the bed, and there's a lot of stuff that happens like in bed
Mm.
that I think are really neat, like camera tricks. Like you get Renton like kind of falling through the bed as he's going on this trip, or like people will be like in bed with him and he'll like turn over and they're not there anymore, and it seems like pretty fluid, like it's in one single camera
Hmm.
motion, which is really
Yeah.
cool. So I think like the visual trickery that Danny Boyle is utilizing to kind of get the viewer almost in like the mindset that you're like also going on like this trip and crash and like attempt at sobriety alongside of Renton, I think is really effective.
Yeah. Yeah, you definitely have these mixed emotions of, at least I did, the first time I saw this, of being like, what is this really like? I mean, it really does take you on the journey of if you've never done this before, let me enlighten you to the good and the bad, right? Where like the imagery of him going, dipping in, like literally jumping into the toilet after some drugs, that it looks like the absolute worst toilet on the planet. Like it's so, so gross. But that he's so desperate for it. He's so desperate for these drugs. He's chasing this feeling, and they're trying to explain to you how this feeling is just the best thing that you could ever feel. It's better
Hmm.
than any sexual experience. And we are introduced to his friends, one of which is a girl who even says it herself, right? As I don't know if it's her first time or if it's, but somebody else is like helping her do heroin, and she is saying how it's so incredibly amazing, it's just the best thing, and she's never going to feel this good again. And
Hmm.
it kind of, I don't know, it also helped me as an audience member like grow some empathy for people who have this addiction, because if there really was something that if you did it would kill you, and it would or ruin your life or both, but if you never did it, you would never feel that kind of joy ever again. And
Hmm.
saying goodbye to heroin and really getting clean forever is really just saying, I'm never going to feel that good again. That's really sad. Um, that's got it. And no wonder it's so hard, right? Because Renton,
Yeah.
we get through about, 25 minutes of the movie of him being clean. And he's like, yeah, this is for the birds, man. We got to go get high like right now, like
Hmm.
immediately. Let's do it.
Yeah, and you have a couple of like I said, you go with Renton kind of on this journey of him basically getting high and getting sober and kind of back and forth over the course of the film, right? So he starts off trying to get sober, and then he doesn't, and he ends up going on the bender. He ends up getting arrested and doesn't end up having to go to jail because he's going to go into some sort of rehab, and he kind of gets forced into going cold turkey. At his parents' house there, and kind of along the way, you're getting kind of the intermingling with his friends here, which I think it is why this movie is effective, especially for people who are probably about the age of Renton and Spud and Sick Boy and Tommy and Bigby in the film because it's like your like classic like group of friends, right? Then like kind of the influence that friends have on you. In a
Mm.
way, because not all of these friends are heroin users. Some of them have their own addiction to getting in bar fights and causing mayhem that way. And you have the other ones that are clean and are trying to help you out. So then you're watching it from the perspective of Renton, but then I mean, you can also kind of in the back of your head be like, well, I can really, kind of, see through the eyes of Tommy here and be like, why are you guys getting high all the time? We don't need to be getting high all the time, do we? Is that something that we need to do? So I think that like the inner play here of the group is kind of interesting, and the way that it is kind of like a cat chasing its own tail kind of a
Mm.
thing here for Renton, both in terms of the life that he's living, and then kind of in terms of addiction and how those things kind of keep feeding into each other. And I think it's kind of a neat look at that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Renton has a very interesting moral compass, right? So in one of the situations where he is newly sober, he has a libido. So he goes to the club and he's like, I'm gonna get some tonight. I'm gonna go, hang out with a girl. And his friend Tommy, who's at this point very clean, he's got his girlfriend, and then Spud has got some girl that tries to take him home. That girl, by the way, was in Bridget Jones's Diary, and she's amazing.
Mm.
She was wasted because her this part was so small, but I love her. And he meets Kelly McDonald and in this club, and she looks great, and she's like, "Let's go." He hits on her, and she immediately gets into a taxi. She seems to know exactly what she wants. He goes home with her. They have a very interesting time, and then like afterwards, she's like, "You need to leave. You need to go sleep on the couch." And in the morning, he realizes that she is like in the equivalent of high school, maybe even younger. Her parents, that whole situation is weird. And he is all up in a tizzy. He's like, I can't touch you. I can never see you again. And that's more problematic to him than he's like, I'm gonna steal my television out of an old age home to go pay for my heroin addiction. Like it was so strange to me, right? And
Mhm.
like one of the sacred things that happens between him and his friends, as you say, like as they grow up together and their influences on each other, right? Tommy was never interested in drugs until his girlfriend breaks up with him, and his girlfriend kind of breaks up with him in part for a prank that Renton decides to play on him, and they
Mhm.
never really address that. So Renton probably feels kind of guilty in that way, but it's after Tommy is so desperate and sad that his girlfriend has is said there's no chance we're getting back together. That's when he tries heroin, and that gets Tommy is not equipped to deal with that well, and it ravages his body, and it's one of the things that ends up killing him because he contracts AIDS because of the sharing of the needles, and he ends up dying of this disease that of a stroke with and so it's absolutely terrible, right? And out of all the people in this group of friends, like he was the one who was the cleanest the longest. And I think
Mhm.
that is that irony of how that went down is probably a very true story in a lot of friend circles of friends that over the course of time due to this kind of addiction. And I really just I hesitate to use the word loved because it makes it sound like it was so great to watch. It wasn't great to watch, but it was important to watch that kind of unfold, and the way in which Danny Boyle crafts that story
Mhm.
through the imagery is really impactful.
Yeah, I thought that like the imagery and the storytelling was probably like you said, the most impactful part of this for me as well. Just kind of the way it's presented. You mentioned Requiem for a Dream, and I thought about that film kind of a lot, or at least off and on while I was watching this, and how they were similar and how they were very, very different at the same time. Trainspotting to me felt much more of like this like roller coaster that you were on
Mm.
with Danny Boyle and like Renton, like you were sitting next to Renton and this roller coaster throughout the film. Where I think Requiem of a Dream, if you're more familiar with that film, listeners at home there, that to me is more of like a carousel where you're seeing like kind of a vignette of
Mm.
something terrible from drug use, and then it kind of circles around, and then you see like the next thing of it, right? It's less of like a ride and more of like a kind of like a slideshow, I guess, if that makes any sense. So I thought that it was interesting from that standpoint, and then I think that it's just interesting in terms of filmmaking because Danny Boyle, obviously, we know from 28 years later, 28 days later, uh, I mentioned at the top there, and kind of the directing like influence that that had on that film, which would come 5 years later, which I thought was really interesting. But to me, the most interesting part of this, because you have Renton here, is obviously the main character. He starts with the opening monologue, which ends with kind of the same monologue, and a lot of the film is done via voiceover from Ewan McGregor, but just how like the whole movie like revolves around Ewan McGregor's like ability to do this, and it's no wonder that he, went on to have this, fantastic career that he went on to because he's great because he doesn't have like there's not like a lot of like story that he's working with, right? He's really just kind of like keeping the engine of this thing churning for about 90 minutes, and it's really kind of spectacular to watch, which is why shortly after this he gets hired to be Obi-Wan Kenobi because he's Scottish and he's a really good actor. So.
Yeah, yeah, no, that makes sense. Um, I didn't think about the Scottish part, but you're probably right there.
Because
I
Alec Guinness,
think,
he had to be young Alec Guinness, right? So
yeah, yeah, that makes sense. I feel like this film, you talked about it being only 90 minutes long. I was shocked at how short this movie was, given all of the things that happen in it. I mean, we haven't even talked about some of the stuff. Like, I mean, this film, there's so many like things that happened because of this tightness of friends. Like Begbie is the one who's addicted to fighting, and he doesn't do any drugs. And so you'd think he'd be the most centered. He is probably the most insane, mentally like not
oh
well
yeah,
person. Um, it's terrible. It's terrible. His relationship with Sick Boy is just in love and with 007. He's like everything James Bond. He's all about it, and he's talking about it throughout the movie, and you don't understand why. Um,
Robert
but you,
Carlyle is the actor who's playing
mm,
Francis Bigby there, who's getting in all of these fights, and there might not have been a more like perfect casting for Robert Carlyle. Like it seems like that's like what he is like born to do is
yeah.
be this shit stirrer in a bar.
I mean, it's interesting because the first time I remember seeing Robert Carlyle was in a movie called Go Now, and the preview for that said Robert Carlyle from Trainspotting. And
Mhm.
so like so many of these actors like Johnny Lee Miller is Sick Boy, right? And um he's also like all of this film like really takes these amazing Kevin McKidd and these amazing actors who then go off and kind of have their own varied career. It's interesting to see how they shaped, and many of this was like the jumping off point for them. Um, and rightfully so, because I don't know if we had casted anybody differently, how different this movie would have turned out and how different you would feel at the end of it. It's
Mhm.
interesting that they're adding that casting category as an Oscar nominated and category to win and have achievement in because of something like this. Because if you had somebody else playing Begbie, it would not have gotten the same reaction. I mean, there's a scene where he bumps into a poor guy at the pub. The guy says he's sorry like numerous times, and then he basically like glasses the dude in his face, like and like
Yeah.
that kills it. I mean, it's really this guy is absolutely nuts, and you're just but they're like, but he's a mate, isn't it? Like he's my mate, so what am I supposed to do? And I'm like, I don't know, maybe not hang out with him. And when
Yeah.
you get to the end of this, right, Renton has finally feels like he has enough. They decide at the end of all of this, they decide that they're gonna move a pound of heroin or a kilo of heroin and get and make some mad cash, and so they do. And he decides to steal it from all of them except for Spud, who is like in that scene where they're all laying down and asleep except for Spud, and he sees that Renton's leaving with the money, and he's just shaking his head like, no, this is a bad idea. Begbie's gonna wake up and he's gonna skin us all alive. What are you doing? And Renton's like, I'm out of here. It's crazy. I don't know. It's crazy. It's crazy that I mean they do make it out alive. It's crazy that Renton makes it out alive because apparently there's a T2, which I did not see. Um,
Yeah. Seems
But
unlikely. I didn't watch it. I didn't watch Trainspotting until this week. So the idea that there was a second one 20 years later seems seems unlikely. But I'd be interested to see how they do that because they get like the whole cast is all back. So that's pretty neat. So yeah. So there's that. And then as I said, the film kind of ends again with this kind of a monologue speech kind of thing that Renton is giving about choosing life, right? And you choose like to do like all of the dull things. And I think that's one of the like the critical like analytical like critiques of this film is that you're you know when you have an addiction and you know people say that you trade like one addiction for the next, right? You have to like pick something up to take its place basically if you're going to move on from one, and that is having like a normal life is that like the same as being addicted to heroin, right? Is like paying your taxes and, you know, going to your job that sucks every day and, you know, stopping at the grocery store once a week and, you know, doing all these boring, mundane things. Is that any better or worse, different, than that? And, I don't know if that's really like the crux of it or if that's like what the thesis that Danny Boyle was going for. But I think that, you know, kind of if you're meant to be on this ride with Renton, I certainly think that you're meant to understand that that's what he's thinking as he's going through the highs and lows of this and he's trying to detox and he's like, is it worth doing the heroin was more fun than doing those other things. Was it? Or is it? I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, you lose all sense of time. I mean, they're in that house. All of these houses, by the way, like everyone's house looks like a crack house, you know? I mean, they all
Yeah.
have no furniture. Maybe because it's all been sold. I don't know. But like all of the houses have no furniture in it. They have like blankets on the floor. This one house, I guess it's their friend Jessica's. She has like a baby crawling around and they
Mhm.
lose all sense of time. And so, you know, the baby doesn't get fed. That's terrible. I don't know. And then you wake up and you're like, "Oh, the world is terrible. My
Mhm.
baby is dead. Let's just get high again and it'll all go away." I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
It made it look like pretty terrible to be not high if you are addicted. Like if you're addicted, the goal is to always be high.
Yeah.
And
But
he
it
says that, but
but it made it look like it was also terrible to be high. And I assume that
yeah.
I assume that that's probably true. And I think both things are true, right? Like if you're an addict of, you know, whatever the case is, you're either getting that high, which is terrible, or you're not, and that is also terrible. And I think that this movie illustrates that pretty well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kind of wrapping up here on train spotting, I guess, just from my perspective, like I said, I just watched this the first time this week. It's very hard to come by. Like I was lucky and caught it streaming somehow. Michaela, you had to get a copy flown in from Scotland, I think,
Yeah,
to
yeah.
get this. I don't know how you got it there so fast, but you were able to get it so we could talk about it. So I hadn't seen it until now, and I think like this very much to me felt like one of those things that like if you have to watch it like in that right like you 5 year like time of your life and then it connects with you differently you know through my older wiser lens like I didn't really like connect with this movie that much but I certainly could like understand like why it is so highly regarded and why you know
Mm.
people are drawn to it why you know the humor really lands with people and stuff like that I thought that that was really interesting but I mean as far as like the movie goes I was like oh man Trainspotting's like it was one of my best movies now you know as a middle-aged 40-year-old dude myself so I don't know so from that standpoint yeah but I was excited to have watched it because I think it is monumental in a lot of ways like I said it's you know starts the career here for Danny Boyle, for Ewan McGregor, for Kelly MacDonald, who went on to do kind of amazing things there. And I thought it was interesting from that standpoint. And I think you know you get kind of those movies. You said Blow, Requiem for a Dream. I think even like Memento, I think has a lot of the same kind of like energy
Mm.
of like losing like yourself and like the place of the film and the way that it was done and as Danny Boyle to thank for like stuff like that I don't know for sure but you know certainly I think went a long way and this movie was pretty monumental it made a lot of money it got nominated for the Academy Award which I mentioned it got the sequel in 2016 or 17
17. Yeah.
I don't know maybe I'll have to watch that sometime I think that is a little easier to find so that's good but when did you watch this the first time did you watch it like back like closer to time when it came out, or were you older?
So I watched this. I was in college. I definitely was in college, and there was a girl named Krista who was a math nerd with me, and she was like, "Oh, you've not seen this," and I said, "No," and she was like, "Well, um, there's a moment that you're going to be like, this is absolutely as bad as it can be, and then it's going to get worse, and just be ready." And I was like, "Okay." And she was not wrong. Um, she really tried not to spoil it, and she did not, but it was real bad. I feel like this was great to watch. I think for me, it was great for me to watch in my early and late teens, early 20s, because I can honestly say I have never, ever been tempted to do heroin, like not even once. Now, I don't know if that's actually the goal here. I was a dare kid, so we were told like that if smoke any sort of marijuana, that you're two steps away from the toilet scene, basically in
Right.
Trainspotting. Okay. And then I don't think that's actually true, but I feel like for me, it was like, ooh, this could really just, you could have everything going for you, and this drug can really just ruin it all. And um, how people who didn't maybe know any better, because in the 90s and in the 80s, it was a very different time. They didn't have programs that were like, hey, this stuff is bad, just don't even try it. And so, I think you're right. I mean, I think for me, it was very pivotal in how I feel about drugs and how I feel about your group of friends and the influences that you have on each other. How I feel about, being in like a city and living, because I lived way out in the middle of nowhere, growing
Hmm.
up. So I wasn't going to have, six friends at a flop house. You know what I mean? Like, that wasn't ever
Right.
going to really be a thing. But, so it really opened my eyes to a lot of that. And again, the grittiness and the way that in which this story is told, and it's kind of a backdrop to so many other films that do something similar in their own amazing ways, with the whole addiction aspect. I did find that it was a pivotal film for me to watch. But I do think that if you're past that age of being tempted, I maybe, or like you've chosen life, you've done the thing, you've chosen a job, and you've
That's
gotten a
true.
house, and you've done the things, and you've already done that. You're like, oh, I chose life instead of heroin. I don't know if that's good. I don't know. It's certainly less impactful, I think, but
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too, at least from my standpoint. But like I said, I could certainly see like how monumental of a thing that this was, and at the time that it was made in 1996, and we kind of mentioned those other films that piggyback off of it, coming after that. You mentioned at the top too about the about you were able to watch it with subtitles, right? Because I
mm,
I guess your college aged years probably heard better too. Although you're probably better at dissecting Scottish accents now than you were then, back in your Texas college days, I would think. But
yeah, yeah.
um, but that was one of the interesting things, and this was, I guess, kind of shot around the same time. This came out, I think, the same year, or the year before Pulp Fiction, potentially. So it was kind of shopped as that a little bit, and it did kind of hit on the fact that yeah, they're in kind of this downtrodden area of Edinburgh. Is that where they're at? Um, in Scotland there, and how that could be, kind of a stand-in for kind of anywhere, right? If you're in a downtrodden part of like London or Paris or New York or San Francisco, right? Like you could basically put this into any kind of a place, and that kind of generates some more appeal to it, I think, worldwide. And I was reading that apparently there were some scenes, and the only scene I remember that had actual like subtitles in it are at
Mm,
the club scene. And I don't know
yes.
if that was done uh, because of like the American cut of it, because apparently that was one of the things that the American distributors wanted was some some more subtitles, so our dumb American ears could understand the Scottish accents a little bit better. So I thought that was kind of interesting to see, but that's probably my favorite scene in the film is when they're at the club, and it's kind of
Mm,
that huge wide shot. Like I don't know, he had to have been like a mile back to get the shot as wide as it was, because it looks like Danny Boyle shot it on like a handy cam, which he probably did because that's how he shot 28 Days Later. Um, but it's this huge wide scene, and they're like talking, and they look like they're like a mile away, and you're just reading
hmm
kind of the captions there, because of course you can't hear them because the music and stuff is loud, and then it kind of goes through. kind of each of the friends and like what they're doing at the club, and then alternately what they're doing like after the club is they've kind of paired off and gone for the night. I think that's probably my favorite like sequence of the film.
Mm,
So I thought that was interesting there too. So
yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, the soundtrack, it's interesting. There's a lot of Iggy Pop in there, a lot of references to Iggy Pop. Uh,
apparently Danny Boyle directed an Iggy Pop like music video to like tie into this
no,
as part of like the marketing material for it. So
oh, that's cool. I don't know. The feel of this, I really do think that the feel of this movie is a very accurate snapshot to that place and that time and to that slice of life, as you call it, right? Um, and it's probably a little bit how I felt watching Dazed and Confused because I missed the window on that, but I can still have an
mhm.
appreciation for it, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, for sure.
For sure. So, yeah, so that's going to wrap it up here for Train Spotting. So let us know out there if you saw Train Spotting when it came out, if you've watched it recently, if Train Spotting 2 or T2 or whatever it's called is worth checking out. Maybe we'll have to fire that one up and see how Renton and crew are getting on here, 30 years after the fact. That's pretty good. And let us know if you think Ewan McGregor is the best Obi-Wan Kenobi around. Also, Kelly MacDonald in Star Wars now, too. She is a bounty hunter. Pocket and
Yeah.
and Skeleton Crew, so that's pretty good. That's pretty good. Everything always leads back to Star Wars, 100%. So let us know all that stuff, and let us know if you make up a penicillin cocktail. It's a good one. Try it out. Let us know. Send us pictures, all that stuff. You can do that on our social medias. It's at Drink the Movies on Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and Facebook.com/Drink the Movies. If you want to see pictures of the penicillin that Michaela made, get the episode recaps, recipes, links to all the things that can be found on our website. It's www.drinkthemovies.com. And if you want to support the podcast and get bonus content, extra episodes, hangouts, chats, all that stuff, that can be found on Patreon. It's patreon.com/drinkthemovies. Michaela, we've got some more Danny Boyle coming everyone's way next week. We're going to do our best, at least, to go out and see 28 years later, the Bone Temple. Is that what it's called? Is that
That's
what
that's
is
what
that
it's
what,
called.
is that what the sports bet was called that Renton went in to use the bathroom, the Bone Temple? I don't know. Maybe. But we're going to be talking about that next week, and of course we got the lobby bars coming. So where can everyone, make sure they're getting all that content coming onto their podcast feed?
You can find us on Apple Podcasts. You can find us on Spotify, Good Pods, anywhere where Spotify podcasts are supported and distributed. We do 2 drops a week here at Drink the Movies. We do our lobby bar, talking about the box office and usually talking about a cocktail that anyone, even you, can make. Real easy stuff. And then we do our deep dives like the one that you listened to today. If you're liking what you're hearing, there is a subscribe button on any sort of rectangle or any laptop that you could be listening on. Press that button so you don't miss anything. Also, if you like video games, go check out Drink the Video Games. Brian does an amazing job bringing you video games of old and new. And I always pop in to talk about a cocktail, and that's always fun. So do that. It really helps us get all the Drink the Movies, Drink the Video Game stuff out there.
Absolutely. So that's going to wrap it up for episode 251. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you next time on
Drink
Drink
the
the
Movies.
Movies.
Never been so terrified of a baby on a ceiling before, but that was scary as hell.
Yeah. Scary all the time with the baby. When it's on the floor by itself, it's in the bed, when it's on the ceiling. Don't do drugs out there, kids.
Don't do drugs. Please
Drugs are
don't.
bad.
Okay.